You're standing at the city gate, where everything gets decided. The stone bench is crowded. Elders lean forward. Witnesses push in. The air is hot with dust and anger. Two families face each other like drawn blades. A man is hunched over, one hand pressed to his face. Blood threads between his fingers. Someone keeps saying, "He took his eye." Another voice answers, "Then take his." You can feel how natural it sounds, how righteous it feels. Payback that matches the pain. The accused man's brother shouts over the crowd, swearing it was an accident. The injured man's cousin spits on the ground and calls him a liar. The women cry. The young men clench their fists, ready to finish this outside the court. Then the elders ask for the Torah. A scroll is unrolled carefully, as if the parchment itself could calm the rage. An old voice reads words you've heard your whole life. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And the crowd murmurs like the sentence has finally fallen. But you hesitate, because something doesn't fit. Is God really handing you a holy permission slip for revenge? Or is he doing something far more surprising right in the middle of human fury, something hidden in plain sight? Here's what everyone gets wrong about an eye for an eye. Most Christians hear it as God endorsing harsh personal vengeance, and then they read Jesus, turn the other cheek, as if he's correcting an old, cruel Bible. But that's not what the Bible actually teaches. Eye for eye is not a command for you to get even. It's a limit placed on what your anger wants to do. In the Torah, this principle is what scholars call *lex talionis*, a proportionality standard, a ceiling, not a sword. That scene at the city gate matters, because the text doesn't picture you in the street, hunting someone down to balance the scales. It pictures judges, elders, witnesses, a public court. In other words, God is dragging vengeance out of the hands of the wounded clan and placing it under covenant accountability. He's cutting the fuse on blood-feuds. He's saying no more escalation, not go make them suffer. And it goes even deeper. This formula, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, means the punishment or restitution must match the harm, not exceed it, not multiply it, not expand from one injury into a generational war. So when Jesus says in Matthew 5, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye," he's not rejecting God's justice. He's confronting a misapplication, people taking courtroom language and using it as a license for personal payback. Jesus isn't replacing a revenge-based Old Testament. He's exposing how human hearts twist even restraint into retaliation. But to understand why eye for eye was mercy in its original setting, you have to go deeper into the world that produced it. The reason this law feels severe to modern ears is because you're hearing it outside the world it was meant to restrain. In a clan-based society, an injury is never just personal, it's family, it's honor, it's future security. And when someone takes something from your household, an eye, a tooth, a livelihood, your people feel pressure to answer with more, not equal. That's how feuds are born. One wound becomes two become 10. Soon it isn't about the original harm at all. It's about restoring status through dominance. So the Torah keeps pulling you to a specific place, the gate, the public court, the elders who hear cases. This is justice moved out of private hands and into covenant space. Notice what that does. It slows everything down. It demands witnesses. It makes decisions public. It forces the strong to submit their anger to a standard they didn't invent. And it protects the weak, because without a measured standard, the powerful can always retaliate more. They can call it justice, but it's really leverage. Meanwhile, the vulnerable, those with no large family, no reputation to defend them, get crushed in the crossfire. Eye for eye is God refusing to let injury become an excuse for domination. It's a boundary drawn around human wrath. And there's a quiet theological claim underneath it. Israel is not allowed to act like the nations. Justice belongs to God, and his people handle it under his supervision. That's why these laws are surrounded by courtroom realities, judges, testimony, deliberation. The instinct is to strike back quickly. The Torah insists on something slower, something accountable. So when you picture eye for eye, don't picture a man sharpening a knife in his yard. Picture elders forcing two furious families to stand still long enough for truth to be spoken and proportion to be enforced. And once you see that, the phrase starts sounding less like vengeance and more like restraint. But then the next question hits you. If this was meant for courts, why does it sound so absolute, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth? Is it literal mutilation, Or is the text doing something more precise than you've been told? When you follow the phrase through the Torah, it keeps showing up in places that feel nothing like personal payback slogans. In Exodus 21, 22, 25, it's embedded in case law real-life scenarios. A fight breaks out. A pregnant woman is harmed in the chaos. The text talks about what is assessed, what is owed, and how judgment is rendered. You're not watching vigilantes, you're watching a community figure out measured consequences. In Leviticus 24, 17, 22, the point widens. The passage is about maintaining holiness and justice inside the covenant community. And then comes the line many readers skim too fast. The same rule applies to the sojourner and the native-born. Equal justice, no two-tier system. In Deuteronomy 19:16-21, the target is even more specific: false witnesses. This is about someone trying to weaponize the court itself to ruin another person. The eye-for-eye principle becomes a deterrent against legal abuse. If you try to inflict a penalty through lies, you face the penalty you tried to manufacture. And that's when the phrase starts to sound different. Because the repeated setting implies the audience isn't your private anger, it's the judges and the community responsible to carry out justice. Even the Hebrew structure reads like a proportionality formula. It's a pattern of equivalence, life for life, eye for eye, signaling correspondence, not escalation. The law is saying the response must be bounded by the harm, and in practice, Scripture itself shows that equivalence can be expressed as restitution, not just physical replication. The Torah often pushes toward making someone whole, paying what was lost, restoring what was damaged, because the aim is not bloodthirst. The aim is justice that fits. So eye for eye functions like a sacred measuring line held up against human rage. It keeps the community from calling cruelty fair. It keeps the powerful from bending outcomes with status. And it insists the vulnerable native or sojourner stand under the same protective canopy of law. But then Jesus quotes this line and says, "Do not resist the evil person." If this was already limiting retaliation in court, what exactly is he confronting in everyday life? And why do his examples feel so provocative? You've seen the setting, and you've traced the phrase through the Torah. Now comes the twist most readers miss. Jesus' words aren't anti-justice. They're anti-escalation in a far deeper way. And that's why, when Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye," he's not picking a fight with Moses. He's picking a fight with what people did with Moses. Listen to the target in Matthew 5:38-42. Not courts, not judges, not witnesses at the gate. It's the daily friction where your pride wants a receipt. Do not resist the evil person. Then the examples: a slap on the right cheek, a lawsuit over your tunic, being forced to go 1 mile, someone begging, someone borrowing. This isn't Jesus abolishing justice. It's Jesus exposing how a judicial ceiling got turned into personal permission. That first example matters. A slap on the cheek in that world is often less about injury and more about insult, an honor hit. It's an invitation into the honor game. Return the shame. Prove you're not weak, Jesus says in effect. Don't let their sin recruit your soul. Don't let their dishonor script your response. Turning the other cheek isn't pretending nothing happened. It's refusing to escalate the insult into a war. Then the court image. If anyone would sue you and take your tunic, notice he doesn't say the court is meaningless. He pictures you in a legal conflict and calls you to release your grip on the outcome, even your rights, rather than weaponizing the law as revenge. And the forced mile roams coercion. Jesus doesn't romanticize oppression. He breaks the cycle of spite. 1 mile is compliance. 2 miles is freedom. Not because the empire is righteous, because your heart doesn't have to be owned by the one who mistreats you. So Jesus isn't saying God's old way was vengeance. Now God is nice. He's saying God's law was never your excuse to strike back. It was already restraining violence. And now in the kingdom, my people go further, choosing mercy where vengeance feels logical. And once you see that, a harder question rises. If Jesus won't let you use Scripture to justify payback, how many Christian grudges are actually dressed up as biblical justice? Because the phrase still gets used like a match in a dry forest, one spark, and suddenly retaliation feels holy. Eye for eye becomes the caption under a cold text message, a family cut-off, a scorched earth comment, a relationship reduced to "they did it first." Even in Christian speech, it turns into a sanctified version of matching energy. But in Scripture, that instinct is exactly what the law was choking off. The point was never, make them suffer what you suffered. The point was stop the spiral, measure it, judge it. Don't let anger invent its own scale. And here's the tension you have to hold with both hands. The Bible does not call evil not evil. Harm is real. Scripture can speak about judges, witnesses, and public justice without blinking. The correction is where you locate the right to repay. The Torah pulled vengeance out of the hands of the offended and placed it under accountable judgment, and Jesus pulls vengeance even farther out of the heart of the disciple. That's why mercy in Matthew 5 isn't naivety, it's strength under control. It's refusing to let someone else's wrongdoing become the blueprint for who you become next. You can name what happened and still refuse to mirror it. You can seek justice and still refuse to save a payback. You can set boundaries and still release the craving to see them hurt. And when the New Testament says, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, leave it to the wrath of God," it's not telling you the world has no moral order. It's telling you that you are not the executioner. God does not need your bitterness to keep the universe fair. So the corrected reading lands like this. Scripture moves in a line, from feud to court, from court to cross, from proportional restraint to enemy love, not because God got softer, because God has been interrupting escalation from the beginning. So what does it look like when a community actually believes that? When it stops confusing vengeance with faithfulness and starts looking like the God who restrains, measures, and then, shockingly, absorbs? This is the hidden thread running through the whole story. God's justice is not cruelty, and Jesus' mercy is not lawlessness. The law that said, life for life, eye for eye, was already a divine interruption, God stepping into human rage and saying, no further, not more than this, not on your terms. He put a ceiling over violence so the weak wouldn't be swallowed by the strong, and so anger wouldn't pretend to be righteousness. Then Jesus stands on a hillside and takes that same world still full of slaps, lawsuits, coercion, and insult, and he refuses to let his people keep the old reflex, not because justice vanished, but because the kingdom is arriving. A people is being formed who can suffer wrong without becoming wrong, who can face evil without multiplying it. And where does that road finally lead? To a cross where God does not demand an eye from you, he gives his own life instead. The ultimate restraint, the final interruption, not denial of harm, but the defeat of vengeance as a way of being human. So when you hear an eye for an eye, don't picture God handing you permission to strike back. Picture God putting his hand between you and the spiral, saying, enough. If this kind of hidden in plain sight reading opened the text for you, there's more where that came from. More places where a familiar line means something far deeper than it sounds. You're invited to subscribe and keep going, especially as we explore what Jesus meant by turn the other cheek in its first century setting.